Hi there, it's Carl Irwin, the Common Magician. I've got a few moments here to talk with you and share some ideas. I've been talking about this for a while, but I haven't had a chance to make a video on it. This is a technique that I do like to use infrequently. I carry it with me all the time. I'm always prepared to do this either in an impromptu setting or with a notepad that I might have on me, and I'll talk about that in a moment. We have addressed this before. I've gotten some feedback from magicians who watch the channel and have noticed some of my commentary on this, some pointers, some tips, and some of their own experiences. I want to share with you my feelings on this, and this is an incredibly personal kind of thing. Okay, this is an incredibly personal subject matter that I think anyone who tells you that there is a right way to do this or a best way to do this, I don't think you can really take that advice as the gospel. I think you have to consider your own concerns, your own limitations, your own desires in terms of presentation, and I think you should seek out your best way rather than adopting someone else's best way, all the while certainly taking advice, for what it's worth and investigating that advice. This is incredibly simple. This is a very, very simple situation here. We've got a deck of cards. This is a really, really bland example of this kind of presentation here. What we're going to do is very, very, very simple. I'm going to have you select a card, but before you do that, I want to make a record of something on my pad here. So if I just write something down, there. Okay, so I've got my record, and I would have you think of a card or pick a card or something, or this could be any piece of information. It could be something like a name, someone you're thinking about, someone you know from your past. It could be a famous person. It could be a city, something like that. And I don't really know what I wrote, what it means. I just know that it has something to do with what you're thinking. And in this case, because the video format here, we'll just use a playing card. It's this, the Queen of Hearts. Now, I'll let you stick with that or change your mind. The Queen of Hearts is a pretty well-known card. You can either stay there, or would you like to pick another one? Another one? You want to think into something different? Okay, we have the Six of Diamonds. Now, I'll tell you what. I'll even let you make up your mind now. You can go with that, Six of Diamonds, or you can go with your first choice. Which one do you want? You want to stick where you're at? Okay, here's what I've got. You can see that it says Six of Diamonds. So this is an example of a mentalism gimmick, and right away as I demonstrate it, some of you who do this are going to say that's not how you're supposed to do it. There's better ways to do it. There's better presentation. There's better technique. I want to talk about how that may be the case, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the case. And even as we look at the gimmick in question, some of you are going to have opinions about the gimmick that I settle with as opposed to the one that you use. But I'm going to explain my own reasons for why I do this the way that I do it. Okay, so this is it would be a Swami gimmick, I guess you would say. In my case, it is not a Swami gimmick. It is a thumb writer. Typically, the Swami gimmick, as we know it, is a nail writer. It is something that goes underneath the nail, the thumbnail, and has a piece of lead on it or some kind of element that can write. And from that, you can write in secret without having a pencil in hand. This is a very large pad. Some people will do this on a smaller piece of paper like billets from a small pad, or Post-it notes. I like Post-it notes a lot for this kind of a thing. I'll explain why different types of writing platforms are better suited to different circumstances here as I go through this. But first, let me show you my gimmick. The gimmick that I've settled on, and I have several of these, and I carry different ones at different times depending on how I have to write. This is a thumb writer. This is a Vernay thumb writer. This is a factory Vernay thumb writer, and I've replaced the lead a few times on this. It's a pretty simple kind of procedure. You just have to get the right size lead, and you can take, there's a little Boone writer inside of it that doesn't have any stick on it that goes into a hole that's in the thumb tip. And I can carry this in my pocket and carry it around when I need it. I just put it on my thumb, and now I'm free to write with my thumb on the pad. Well-known apparatus. Not a lot of coverage on YouTube tutorials about this. Not a lot of people talk about it, in spite of the fact that this is a very, very old, extremely well-published gimmick. So I go with the thumb writer. Now I have several thumb writers. Here's another thumb writer. This is the one I actually like to carry. This is my favorite one. And this is, I made this one. It's a smaller piece of a thumb tip. It's cut a little bit shorter. It's kind of bigger on the pad, smaller on the nail, so that it's secure and sits on there. But on this one, I put the lead up in the tip of it, and I found that this is better for small pads like Post-it note pads. This is a Post-it note pad with a credit card on the back, piece of plastic on there, an idea from Banachek and his writing about pocket writing. But I like to use this for the pad, just to give it some backing, and on Post-it notes. Or I will use a very thick wad of billets and a clip or a rubber band on the top, and because of the thickness, it's very, very sturdy to write on. But I like to use this for smaller pads because I find I can write better with the tip of my thumb, particularly if I hold the pad in this way. If I hold the pad like that, I can write across it the lengthways, and I have a lot of control. And in this case, I can actually hold it out there over a person's hand, which was a recommendation I got from, I think Gino Minari shared that with me. His way of doing this is he liked to write with the pad over over the hand of the person, so that you can essentially drop it in their hand at the last moment and they can look at it themselves. And in their recollection is that there's no writing utensil. You wrote it way back here, way back in time, and it's been, in their mind, sitting in their hand when really it's just been hovering over their hand as you've been talking to them, and then you set it there for the final reveal and they can look. I find that I can write very, very well and smaller if I have the lead kind of on the tip where a nail writer would be rather than on the pad. So that's the one I carry. I have another one. This has the same kind of idea. It's more on the tip, but it's a little off to the side. I find that this is a little better for holding a pad in the regular grip. So rather than holding it at the side, but holding it like this, the lead is more well positioned to write kind of with the side of my thumb. Don't like this one that much. I've done a little bit with it. This was more of an experimentation. That's not really the one I use. And then I have another one that I have used before. I don't carry this much, but I use this if I'm going to use a marker. And what it has is a piece of a black crayon is put into a hole in the thumb tip. And for both of these homemade ones, all I did is I put a wad of beeswax in there to keep the lead in place. And that just kind of secures everything inside. Very, very simple sort of solution there for that. Another possibility I've done before, I found wax works better, but you can also take a piece of very good tape, like duct tape, a square of duct tape, and kind of jam it in there and push it down and it will hold. I found that the beeswax is a little bit cleaner, easier to take out, put in, and does keep it secure when it's in the pocket. This works really well with marker, and marker can be very, very useful, particularly if you're using a larger pad. In this case, you might have this gimmick set aside so that you can write with the marker, and you might write down a few different ideas, and this will get to the next point I want to make is, what do you write with a thumb writer if you're a common magician? You're not someone who's practicing an awful lot with this sort of apparatus. And here's an example. You could take a few different, I'm going to look at something else here. This is a pad. The pad has a bunch of names of cities on it. So you have Istanbul, New York, Paris, Amsterdam. They kind of repeat: Tokyo, Barcelona, Chicago. I'm just going to write down a couple here. So let me write down Chicago. We'll write New York. And we'll write, I don't know, Paris. And maybe I'll put Washington, D.C. Okay, so these are four cities that maybe were offered by the spectator or whatever. And I'm going to do one more thing. What I want to do is I'm going to make a mark on here, just based on what I think you're thinking. So we'll make my mark there. And I've selected out of these that you came up with, and let's say that the one that you're thinking of is Paris. Paris. And you can see that right here, I crossed off Paris. So all this is I'm using the thumb writer with a piece of black crayon. Some people might say grease pencil or something, but a very, very soft sort of very stark lead, or a crayon of wax. And all you have to do is put a mark on something that was written legitimately with the marker. And this works extremely well for this because it's hard to tell the difference between crayon and marker. So my suggestion, first of all, is that when you're doing thumb writing, nail writing or thumb writing, depending on the kind of apparatus you use, when you're doing it as a common magician, do make sure that whatever you're writing, it is small in amount. You're not doing a lot of writing. You're making a marking on something that's already pre-existing, or, as was the case with the example, you're writing something that is just a couple of characters. Second piece of advice is, if you're going to be writing characters, write them as large as you possibly can. The larger you write them, the easier it is to write clearly with a thumb writer or nail writer. Same with pocket writing as well. So first piece of advice is write small amounts of information. Second piece of advice is write it big. If you're having someone think of a name or something, maybe somebody they know, or a city, you might do an abbreviation. You might put just down the first couple of letters, or the abbreviation of it. Or if you're thinking of a famous person, you would put an initial for first name and initial for last name. And then that way it leaves you the out of having to only write a little bit of information. How do I cover that up? I will often say, I'm not sure what this means, but I'm getting this. So rather than committing to an absolute end result, an absolute sort of prediction, a complete prediction, I say, I'm going to give you a prediction, but I don't know what it means. I need you to verify what it means. And in that way, you can use initials or abbreviations. I've heard Banachek, in talking about pocket writing, he will write incomplete information as an excuse for poor writing. Say, I kind of scribbled this out, but I really don't know what it means. And in the end, if you look at it, even if it's really bad writing, you can see that it is legible and relative to the information that was announced or thought of. And that in and of itself is a miracle because of the claim that you were not sure what you were recording. Kind of an automatic writing sort of explanation there in terms of covering for the illegibility of it. Okay, so those are some recommendations. Write big, write small amounts. Now let's talk quickly about pads as well. Why use crayon and marker though? I guess I have to address that. I found it's not really that worth it. The number one reason I think to do this is more practical in terms of viewing. If you're kind of in a parlor situation, it's a lot easier to see. That might be the best reason. Now, some magicians will overthink this and think that, well, if I'm using ink, it makes it more legitimate because no one could have a piece of ink apparatus that would write. I think you're thinking too hard when you're thinking like that. What you're doing is you're thinking like a magician who knows about thumb writers, right? And a magician who knows about thumb writers might be a little bit amazed to see something done in ink, or presumably done in ink, because they would think, well, it wasn't done with a thumb writer. But that's magician think. I don't think that that's really the way we ought to be considering what we use. I think that using a crayon, grease pencil, something like that will record a thicker line using marker really is best considered when you're thinking about the distance of your audience. if you're in a parlor situation or a stage situation and you need it to be seen. If you're doing a large auditorium and you're on stage but you're using a camera, a close-up camera with a projection, this would help with that, to see it very clearly. But if you're in an intimate setting, I think pencil is perfectly adequate. I don't see any reason why you need to mimic pen. There's ways to do that. You can either use some gimmicks that use ink and pen. I think those are a little dubious and complex to keep. Or you could take like a colored pencil, a lead that has been filed down very sharp, and use it for like a blue pen. There are those kinds of things. But again, I think it comes out of magician think. I don't think that that's really the right way to approach this. Go with the most accessible. Now, in terms of the writing utensil, I often carry around a kind of fat lead. This is a matching lead to the thumb writer. What that allows me to do is I don't have to have a sharp lead on the thumb writer. I can have a fairly dull lead all the time, because this is a fairly dull lead and it writes kind of dull, kind of fat. So that's what I use, just so that things look consistent. But if you're going to use a pencil, and I recommend that you make sure that the lead is kind of worn down a little bit. It's not entirely sharp. It's not very new. It's not a freshly sharpened pencil. That way you don't have to have the lead sharpened on the thumb writer. As far as the visual, there is something to be said for having a pencil, a real pencil. And this is the reason why. I think it's much more easy to identify and remember because it's yellow and it is a pencil. It's kind of an antiquated writing object, and really the miracle of this kind of magic is in this moment. You write something, then you take the writing utensil and you put it down in full view. Don't make the mistake of putting it away. Don't make the mistake of putting it in your pocket. Some people like to do this. They'll put it in their ear, right? So it's still visible. I suppose if you're standing, that would make sense. But I think it's better to put it down on the table or put it out away from yourself and kind of take a step back. So it's in full view right up until the revelation when you show it. This is really the convincer. It's that moment. That is the most important moment in this kind of magic. It is in the separation of the writing utensil and the isolation, open isolation of the writing utensil well before the revelation, well before information is shared to be revealed as being written. So that I think is very, very critical. Another thing you could do if you're standing is say, could you hold that? And you have them hold on to that. Then they reveal the information. You get your marking and say, here, can you hold on to that for a second? And then you recap. This is a good thing too. So now you're in a situation where they did give you the information while you had pad in hand or a piece of paper in hand. Going back to that Gino Minari idea, you have you got the information at that point, allows you to write it down, but you get rid of it. You do some time delay in some recap. Now remember, you thought of this freely. You came up with this idea. No one talked to you ahead of time. You go all through all that just for a few seconds, maybe 10 seconds or so, and then say, go ahead and take a look at my prediction, and then they see it. And now you have someone holding a pencil over there. You have someone with this in their hand, and you're not touching any of it. That can be very impactful. These areas are far more important than the type of writer that you're using. That's way more important. The type of writer is really a non-issue. The type of writer should have to do with your comfort level. Now, why do I go for a thumb writer? Number one reason, I have tried I'm not going to even get them out. I have tried nail writers, but I keep my nails cut. I keep them cut short. And I've got some fairly, skinny fingers. I don't have a lot to grip onto. My nails are fairly thin and groomed, and I keep them that way. I can't keep the things on there in such a way that they're secure at all. Not at all. And I know someone say, well, it's because you're not using the right thumb a nail writer. Maybe you need to buy a nice one. Or I know someone who does custom ones. You should invest in one of those. I've had that kind of advice thrown at me before. But that gets me to the second idea. The second issue that I have with them, which then negates even a good nail writer, is that I really want to be empty. I want to be empty at all times. And you might say that with a thumb writer on, you're not empty, you have it there. But I argue that when I have a thumb tip on and I'm doing thumb tip magic, the benefit of having a thumb tip is that you are clean. You are clean even when you're not. And that benefit also follows with a thumb writer. I'm clean even when I'm not. All I have to do, if I really want to keep it completely clear, is give a fingertip touch to cover up that lead. That's all I have to do. It can be any finger. And if I'm moving fluidly, I'm empty even like this, just to show my hand, right? And at no time would you ever need to show your hands empty. But I just like the idea of having it on me at all times, not having to retrieve it, not having to ditch it, not having to think through all of that song and dance. I can have it in play, and even after I'm done, I can keep it in play, and I really don't have to be nervous about it or concerned about it. I am empty, and it's very, very easy to control in that way. Likewise, thumb writers, I find for me, are easy to get on. If you are going to be dealing with retrieving and ditching, it's easy to retrieve and ditch. Orientation is a walk in the park. I touch it in the pocket, I can feel the lead, I slip my thumb on it, and I'm ready to rock and roll. When I put it in my pocket, I can take it off very easily. It's just so easy to get off and on without having to look at it, without having to feel and manipulate. So that is the reason why I prefer a thumb writer. Now, other pads. Why use a big pad? Well, the obvious reason is that it gives you a lot of coverage. You can hold the pad like this. I've heard some say, well, you shouldn't hold the pad like that and have hands on. I've done a lot of thinking about that, and my answer to that criticism is I don't see where you're coming from. This is the most vital point. How I'm holding the pad really doesn't matter. Now, I don't want to be doing this, obviously, right? But to hold the pad securely with both hands on it so that I can write legibly at an opportune time, that's perfectly adequate. In fact, I want to show you one other technique here. If you have a pad like this that has a flap, and if it's big enough, one thing you can do with a thumb writer on, and you might want to use a thumb writer like this where the lead is offset a little bit. So the lead is off to the side, so I can actually place the thumb writer on the pad and the lead's not touching it. But I can write, get rid of the pencil, close it. I can pinch it from the side, and for all you know, from this point of view, the pad is closed, but actually my thumb is in there. And a simple tilt of my thumb and a little bit of practice on this, I should be able to write fairly large, write something out like that using a thumb writer. So something to play with is to have a pad that has a flap. You can put the flap down, keep it angled inward, pinch the flap on this side, and it appears that I'm holding the pad like this, when actually I have my thumb all about business in there, and this is way out of angle. You'd have to be standing behind me or at a very sharp angle to the side to see that's the way it is. And that's another bit of coverage. Another idea is to have something that has a window. So if you have a flap or something that can go down, but it's windowed in some way, there's peak wallets, things like that, where you can slip a piece of paper, write something on it, slip it into the wallet, and you have a window on it, or an envelope and a windowed envelope, and you can write onto the back of it. That's another good way to do some coverage. Now, in terms of more reality, this is really nice if you don't feel comfortable. Big pad, no reason not to do it. Don't let anybody convince you otherwise. However, for the purposes of being mobile and walking around, I like to use a small Post-it note pad with a plastic backing or a hard cardboard backing on it. And in this way, I can have this in my shirt pocket or in my pocket, and every now and then when I do this, I carry this around my pocket, the top page will get a little scuffed up and icky. I just take that off and throw it out and when I'm ready to use it. And now I have a nice clean pad. It's sized perfectly. It's well protected by that plastic. I keep it in the same pocket with a thumb writer, so I can go in, get the thumb writer, and get the pad. Grab a pencil, usually this one, write my information down, set this aside or have someone hold on to it or set it down, and then I'm free and clear to write. And I can write anything. and as long as I write it very large. I can write any kind of information in just a few characters. So for example, if I was doing the cities, right, same thing. Think of any city in the world. Think of any city at all, maybe a place you've been before, you have one in your mind. I don't even have a list for them to pick from. And let's say they say something like New York, right? New York City. I can just do two characters and why, and I have it, right? Or if it's a name, it can be first initial, last initial. I can write it very, very securely like this. So small pad's very good. Also, when I hold it like this, it doesn't have to seem unnatural. I think if I'm doing this, it can seem unnatural. But I don't think there's anything unnatural about this, because the implication of holding it like this is not that I'm holding it like this. It's that I'm holding it like this. The assumption is that I'm just holding it like that. This is a very natural way to hold something, especially if you're holding it over the hand. If you're holding it over someone's hand or out in the open, or you're gesturing with it, this is very powerful. I'm standing back here, I'm holding out here, and I'm gesturing. I'm putting it right out in front of their face, and I haven't written yet. But I'm holding it out here like this. I'm doing several things. I'm putting it out in their face in the open, but I'm also giving perfect coverage. It's down. They're looking at the back of the hand on the fingers, and I'm not hiding it. I'm putting it out. I'm not doing this. I'm not trying to keep it secret. I'm actually putting it out in the open and giving myself better coverage than if I were to try to hide something. So those are reasons to use smaller pads for thumb writing. So those are my feelings on thumb writing and nail writing. I really don't have more to say about it than that. It's just where I've kind of ended up over time. I go with the thumb writer over the nail writer just because of the accessibility of it in terms of getting it on, getting it off, the security of it in terms of keeping it in place, and then also the fact that as a thumb tip, I am essentially clean at all times. I'm never dirty because I can show the hand very openly with it on and not give up anything about it. So whereas with a nail writer, I have a piece I've got to ditch. I've got to get it. I've got to ditch it. I got to get it on. I'd have to fumble around with it. And I know some people have become masters at using nail writers, and they have all kinds of advice about how to do those things. But I just find for me and my style doing this way, I don't even have to consider that. I don't have to consider those issues. I can just kind of skip over that and use this. Other ideas, though, in terms of mentalism, just to give you a little bit more information, a little more bang for your buck here. Not just talking about nail writers and thumb writers and getting information that's given freely and then recording it after the fact. Another favorite of mine in terms of mentalism is the forcing of information that is presumably freely thought of, but actually thought of from a long list. I showed you here a moment ago, I had a pad with cities on it. You can see these cities. And I've carried this one around: New York, Amsterdam, Dubai, Istanbul, Tokyo, Chicago, Rome, Singapore, Los Angeles, all these, Sydney, Bangkok. So I've got all these cities that are listed on here, and then I can have someone reach in and lift up, or I'll just riffle through and I'll say stop anywhere. Then they take a look and they can get it. So they get their city on there, if you can see it very clearly. And then we can go into the divination of that. So they're thinking of something freely from an extremely big list, and I know that it is Rome, right? And obviously I give a better presentation of that. But a Sven pad, very, very useful. And to someone, a spectator, if you're using a Sven pad or you're using a pad and writing with a thumb writer, they don't know the difference. They just know that there's information that's recorded. The question is whether or not they're thinking from a mass amount of information that is recorded, or if they're thinking of something freely that you are recording. I kind of put these in the same boat, but they're different techniques in terms of divination of information. One case is a force. I really like Sven pads, and I really like this presentation of cities. I find that this is the most logical, one of the more logical ideas. Another one would be like famous people. famous people. You might have written down on your pad celebrities or something like that. Thematically, if you're doing a kind of show and it's some kind of an icebreaker at a workplace, you might use something that's related to that line of work, a list of people or items that relate to that. But it's highly themed. It's very themable. You can make it thematic to your situation, a Sven pad. And if you don't know what a Sven pad is, it's every other page is the force, but it's cut short. So if I riffle from one direction, it's the coloring book, right? It's the children's coloring book gag. If I riffle from this direction, you see different, and if I riffle from this direction, it's always Rome. So that's the force. Sven pad. I've got one here for adjectives. These are descriptors for like personality or people. So popular, rich, cool, famous, good looking, smelly, right? Weird, dirty, some positive, mean, rich, and they kind of cycle through. And then if I go the other direction, it's always totally awesome any way you do it. So you might run into someone in the street and say, these are adjectives. They might be the way you perceive me, right? And you can see that there's a lot of different ways that people might perceive me. My enemies might think I'm weird or mean, right? My friends might, look at me and say, wow, he's got a lot going for himself. He's rich, I want you to have one too. We'll pick one at random. Go ahead and say stop as I riffle through. You stop, go ahead and take that one right there, and then it's totally awesome. And you get from their mind that they think you're totally awesome. So that is another way to do it. But Sven pads, extremely useful. Another place that the Sven pad can be used is obviously you have the Svengali deck. But I've thought about doing a tossed out deck, a gimmick, which can be mocked up in this way. There's one in particular I've thought about investigating with, investigating and experimenting with, that uses that principle. But it's a really, really solid gimmick where all the cards can be shown and then banded and tossed out. But I haven't had a chance to put one of those together. I need to get enough cards to make a forcing deck to pull that one off. Maybe that's something we'll visit in the future. But anyway, another idea is Sven pads. And the last thing I want to point out in terms of this type of mentalism, I do enjoy doing this written down kind of mentalism. The last piece of apparatus I might carry on me is this, which is a shiner. This is a convex shiner. It's actually a spoon. This is a stainless steel spoon head that's been cut off and filed down and high polished to a mirror finish. And I find that I can palm this and I can point out in front of something like for a book test, and I can get a look at a page number or a first word or something from this. I can also use this if someone's holding up large objects. I can stand and I can look behind me and discreetly place this so it's over my shoulder or down at my side. I can look down at it, and because it's convex, I can see a wide field. Then I can pick out a color of an object, or if I know that it's from a group of objects, I can identify the object if they're very different. Or you can use this for dealing cards, palming it in the hand, deal the card off, and you can instantly see the index. So shiners, that's kind of the limitation of my mentalism, right, in terms of just pure mentalism. Sven pad forces, thumb writers, shiners, reflectors, and a little bit of pocket writing. I don't like to do a lot of pocket writing because you kind of have to be dressed as I am right now. And in spite of the fact that I dress this way for work every day, I just got home from work. And in spite of the fact that I do that, I don't do a lot of magic at work. So normally I don't wear a jacket, and pocket writing is really best done if you have a jacket on. There's good coverage there. I much prefer to have things out in the open. And if I'm going to be abbreviating and writing small bits of information anyway, I kind of rather just be doing it with a thumb writer in the open than doing it from the pocket. So I find I can kind of get the same result with a little more control doing it in this way. So anyway, those are my thoughts on various elements of mentalism, really focusing on thumb writers and the way I see it as a casual performer using that apparatus and the different types that I use. So best of luck with this, and happy magicking.